Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, starting our 11th year as a podcast. Robert with my co-host, Sports Radio 610, Shaun Bijani. And joining us to start the show and preview the Texans Jags game Sunday is Justin Dunk, the host of the Bleav in Jaguars podcast, part of the Bleav Network. Thanks for giving us a few minutes, Justin.
Yeah, man, it's going to be fun. Thanks for having me on.
Man, I'm not sure the average NFL fan would believe this, but the Texans have won 9 of the last 10 over Jacksonville. Justin, how do Jags fans look at this Texans thing? Is this a rivalry after 20 years between these two teams?
I think Jaguars fans are surprised to hear that stat. I'll give you an example. My co-host on the Bleav in Jaguars show, Clay Harbor, former NFL tight end who played for the Jaguars, was shocked that the Texans have won 5 straight games in Jacksonville. He asked me if I double-checked the stat. I was like, yeah, bro, I triple-checked that thing because I was surprised too. And I think it shows that Jaguars fans need to respect the Texans a little bit more, because last year when they went in there to Jacksonville, I think a lot of fans felt like it was going to be an easy win, and that wasn't the case. Obviously, Houston won that game 13-6. It was a disappointing effort from Trevor Lawrence on down, especially on offense. And obviously, the Jaguars came back later in the season and got it done over Houston. But I think you can get the sense now that Jaguars fans are starting to respect Houston, no matter what their record is, and that there's an actual little bit of a rivalry here, I would say, from Duval County.
Those numbers are always kind of fun. I love the historical aspect of rivalries, but we all know this. It means little to absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things, especially when you're looking at this Texans team that's nearly 50% turned over, new staff, new regime, the whole bit. Those players have no idea what the history is, and I'm sure most of them don't care. But in that regard, there is something, too, about going to Florida, going to Jacksonville, particularly this time, though. You know, I talked to a lot of guys in the Texans locker room today, and the sentiment is they feel like their backs are up against the wall. I'm interested to know from you, Justin, what you think the mentality is from the Jaguars at this point in time, who gave Kansas City absolute hell. But I think, for the first time in a long time, they didn't score a touchdown, you know, with Trevor Lawrence as their quarterback, who ended the season last year on a huge uptick into the postseason. And this year, what are you making of it?
Jags fans are honestly disappointed with that loss to Kansas City, and rightfully so, because the offense had a number of chances. There was literally a couple touchdowns that were inches away, Zay Jones and Calvin Ridley in the back of the end zone, from being completed, but it didn't happen. And I think there are some Jaguars fans out there, you can see it on social media, that were expecting to win. So that's a new level for this franchise. And I think it speaks to what Doug Peterson has done with this team, especially with the expectations surrounding that group, his messaging to them. And then this year it feels a lot different because they have Calvin Ridley, who in the past has been a bona fide number 1 target. He showed that in week 1 against the Colts, going over 100 yards, and showed that quickly he's built a rapport with Trevor Lawrence. That changed a little bit against the Chiefs. Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator there, doubled him in the red zone a little bit, Peterson said, and I think they treated him as a number 1 target, so they need some other guys to step up. Christian Kirk did that with over 100 yards. Zay Jones kind of got knocked around. He's dealing with a knee injury, but I think that addition of Ridley has really raised expectations in Duval County and Jacksonville, and I think honestly around the league. My co-host on the pod, Clay Harbor, said that now the Chiefs don't seem invincible anymore, and he felt like last year in the playoffs and then even in the regular season meeting with the Chiefs that the Jaguars weren't quite on Kansas City's level. But watching that game in week 2 against Kansas City, I think you can see that the Jaguars are there. They're ready to play that kind of football, but they got to step up and win those games. And I mean, they can't overlook teams like the Houston Texans either.
I know Texans fans have got to be asking the question, what are the big picture concerns about Jacksonville? Where can the Texans take advantage of this team?
I think the big picture concerns right now lie on the offensive line. Anton Harrison is starting at right tackle. He's a rookie. He was our first round pick in the 2023 NFL draft. And he's had to go against some stout pass rushers, namely Chris Jones in week 2, who lined up a lot of the time at right tackle. I know a lot of people usually think of Jones making a mess on the inside there, but they realized what that matchup was. Kansas City did. Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, and they went after it. And he was an absolute beast. So I think that's one of the weak spots right now. Harrison has to get better and learn fast. Cam Robinson is out for 4 games with that PED suspension. He's 2 games through that. Obviously, he's allowed to be back in the building with the Jags. So I think they're anticipating getting him back. But that offensive line overall needs to play better, especially on the interior. There's been some nicks and bruises with Luke Fortner, and on the far side, Walker Little has played fairly well at that left tackle spot. But I think if you're the Texans, you're looking at this offensive line saying, hey, we can take advantage of some of these matchups on the interior and especially on that right side.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I spoke to Will Anderson and Jonathan Grenard today, and I was asking them about, their approach this week, how they're attacking more of a pocket passing type of quarterback versus a guy like Lamar Jackson or Anthony Richardson, who they'd spent the first 2 weeks of the season prepping for. And the one constant today was everybody talking about how fast Trevor Lawrence has been getting the football out. I think it's amongst the very fastest in the league, like maybe top 4, top 5, if not the best. And I find it interesting because maybe this is a stark difference between an experienced play caller and offensive coordinator in Peterson versus what the Texans are dealing with in Bobby Slowick, who it took him a little bit to figure out the quick pass game and how advantageous that could be when you're dealing with a struggling offensive line. Is that something you've observed with the Jaguars this year, that Peterson has recognized, the offensive line as maybe not being up to snuff, and they needed to find out a way to get the ball quickly into their playmakers' hands?
He's definitely recognized that, but the interesting part around the Jaguars right now, and it's being talked about a lot, especially this week, is the fact that Press Taylor is now the full-time play caller. If we're talking about 4th down situations, Peterson needs to give the green light, but Peterson has tried to, at least for now, shuffle off those duties to Taylor. And Clay Harbor, my co-host on the Bleav pod, really feels like it should be Doug Peterson calling the plays because he felt like the Jags were just getting into a rhythm last year, Peterson and Lawrence together. So I think that's been a concerted effort from Peterson and Taylor, as you mentioned, to get the ball out quicker, knowing this offensive line is not the most stout, especially on the interior. But there is a lot of scrutiny going on right now in Duval County with what Taylor has done. And I think some of it is probably right, but also I think some of it is wrong because there were just a few completions and a few inches away from beating the Kansas City Chiefs, and that would change everybody's tune about Taylor early on. It's only been 2 games. Last year they split that duty, and I think Peterson is confident enough in it. He wants to kind of be more of an overall game manager, but you can definitely see that Lawrence has gotten the ball out quickly. I think a lot of that has to do with his comfort in the offense and also the rhythm he's developed with these 3 stud receivers that he's gotten: Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, and Christian Kirk.
The Colts and Chiefs, night and day defensively. No surprise, Trevor Lawrence, good week versus Colts, bad one versus the Chiefs. Where are you on Trevor Lawrence, big picture, and what do you want to see from him taking another step this year?
To take that next step, he's got to prove that he can beat the Patrick Mahomes of the world head to head. He has not won against Patrick Mahomes. He's now 0-3 going up against him head to head in their careers. And I think he's got to show that in big spots, he can make those throws in crunch time when the pressure is on him. That said, he actually leads Pro Football Focus's big time throws stat with 8 this season. He's tied with Tua Tagovailoa in that category. And I think that shows you that those throws were so close against Kansas City that he probably could have had that win, but he didn't get it. So people are going to scrutinize him. And I think he really needs to prove that he can beat these elite quarterbacks head to head for people to view him as a top 5 or potentially even a top 3 quarterback in the NFL.
Justin, you've alluded to it a couple of times, just how big it would have been for the Jags to pull that victory off against the Kansas City Chiefs. Like a lot of people, I imagine, in Jacksonville feel like if they were able to get that win, that would have kind of solidified them to this point amongst the very best teams in the AFC. Like they're ready to play with the big boys. A win against the Texans this week isn't going to do that, but it's a necessary one. I understand that from a Jacksonville standpoint of view. Where do you see an opportunity? And I guess it's largely contingent upon what things look like and how it shakes down against the Texans on Sunday. But where do you see that opportunity coming from for Trevor Lawrence, for Doug Peterson and the Jaguars to get that victory to kind of write home about, if you will?
I think they're going to have a couple of feature games coming up here, right? After this game at home, they're going to go over and play 2 straight games in London. One of those games is going to be against the Bills in Josh Allen, who I think a lot of people around the NFL would say, arguably, and I think there's certainly an argument there, is that next quarterback after Patrick Mahomes. So that's going to be an opportunity. But Lawrence also has to show that he can beat the teams that he's supposed to beat. And that's how they're viewing the Texans this week. And they have to have respect for them because they lost to Houston last year at home. So he needs to be consistent when he's playing the teams that they're supposed to beat and play really well. And then when he gets that matchup with Josh Allen across the pond, he's got to win that game for people to start really talking about him legitimately being at the top of the AFC and potentially the NFL at the quarterback position.
Let me ask you about just the big picture for this game, and they're favored. The Jags are by 9 Sunday against the MASH unit that is the Texans offensive line. Is it good enough for the Jags just to win with their history against the Texans, or is it they need to send a message or something? Is there a message that's got to be like, hey, we're better than the old Jags?
It's difficult, as you guys know, in divisional matchups, right? Because the teams know each other so well. And I think with the history and the stats that we talked about off the top, the Jags losing streak at home to the Texans, I think they just need to get a win to get to 2-1. But there also is, to your second point there, the idea of sending a message. I think the message has largely been sent from the Jags defense through the first 2 games. They have played well enough to be a 2-0 team. When you hold Patrick Mahomes under 20 points, that's very rare, especially with Travis Kelce on the field. They set the offense up with some short fields that the Jaguars were not able to convert on. So I think that it's just about getting a win, because if Houston comes in there and somehow pulls an upset, there's going to be a lot of people freaking out in Jacksonville about the Jaguars.
Justin, I haven't looked at a whole bunch of Jacksonville Jaguar tape yet. I have seen them, here and there. But one thing that I do know and have noticed a little bit is just how physical and attacking their defense seems to be. They've created a lot of turnovers to this point. I think 6 or 7 is the number through 2 games. And so I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at a guy like CJ Stroud, who hadn't thrown an interception yet, has for the most part taken really good care of the ball. He's got a couple of fumbles, but you can make the argument it really wasn't his fault, as he's had massive trouble with the offensive line as well. Interested to hear your take on what sort of challenge this is going to be for the Texans in terms of what the Jags do well defensively. And if they could take away maybe the best part of the Texans offense right now, which coincidentally is their short pass game, their quick pass game, the ability to get the ball into their playmakers' hands. They made a lot of hay off of it this last weekend, albeit too little too late for them. But how do you see that shaking out on Sunday?
I think, first of all, up front, you talk about Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, fast, physical dudes off the edge. Andy Reid, the Chiefs head coach, referred to those players as being phenomenal. So that shows you the level of respect that those guys have around the league. Allen had a single-game career-high 3 sacks in week 1, suffered a shoulder sprain in week 2, but should be able to fight through it. And Trayvon Walker has already created some issues and some quarterback pressures this season. I'm sure they're looking at that stat, 11 quarterback sacks the Texans have given up, the most in the league so far through 2 weeks, and licking their fingers thinking, hey, we can stuff the stat sheet here. So it starts with those 2 guys up front creating mismatch problems, getting after the quarterback, and even affecting the run game. And you look at Foye Olukun. He's a guy that led the NFL in tackles last year, a guy that really brings the energy for this defense as well. And then Devin Lloyd, who's beside him in the middle there in this 3-4 setup, he's had a bunch of tackles as well. He was trash talking with Travis Kelce last week. So up front, they're fast and they're physical and they get after it. And in the back end, it's really no different. These guys fly around. Tyson Campbell might be one of the most underrated cornerbacks in the entire NFL. On the other side, Darius Williams is no slouch. Either of these guys will get up and be physical. They'll press you. They'll play off a little bit. They'll mix it up. They'll also come downhill and make tackles in the run game. And I think Andre Sisco has been really great for the Jags defensively in the first couple of games. Had a great leaping interception against Mahomes there to get the Jags the ball back. So he's a dude that has played really well. And he's, again, another guy that will come down and play physical. So this unit, I think, is much more comfortable in year two in Mike Caldwell's defense. And you can see it with the way that they're playing fast. They're not thinking like maybe they were at times last year, especially early in the season. They're just reacting now and comfortable with the scheme.
Is the Calvin Ridley you guys are seeing the Calvin Ridley that we saw 3 years ago? Is he the same since the suspension?
There's been some flashes there. Obviously, the standout was that week one game, 8 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. Had some phenomenal snags from Trevor Lawrence in that game. Wasn't quite the same in week two. He was still targeted, but not quite at the rate that he was in week one. Only had 2 catches, I believe it was, for 32 yards. But there's a lot of focus on him, which opened things up for Christian Kirk, who had a single game career high, 11 catches on 14 targets for 110 yards in week two. Kirk's usage went up in terms of the snap count in week two. And I think what we're seeing with Ridley is that he's going to either draw attention or he's going to be able to beat you one-on-one. So I think he has gotten back close to that receiver that we saw before everything that's taken place with him. But we need to see him do it consistently from a production standpoint. And I think if you see guys like Christian Kirk or Zay Jones or even Evan Engram, the outstanding tight end, have big weeks, part of that will be because of the attention that Ridley's getting. And if he gets one-on-one coverage, I mean, he's probably going to come down with it and make a play.
Their run game, Travis Etienne, we know his capabilities, but, they haven't seemed to be able to put things together yet through the first 2 weeks of this season. You have to respect anybody that's in the backfield for whom the Texans are going against. I mean, a Jonathan Taylor-less Colts team, at one point averaged 7.1 yards per carry on the ground. I think it was in the first half this last weekend. I mean, they did whatever they wanted to against this bleak Texans run defense. What are you kind of expecting to see offensively in terms of the run game for the Jags? How well do you think they match up with what the Texans have, or rather have not shown in terms of their run defense to this point?
That's certainly an area that I think the Jaguars will look to exploit. But those guys in the middle, Ben Barch, the left guard, Luke Fortner, the center, and Brandon Sheriff, the right guard, they got to play better. Sheriff has been pretty good, but Barch and Fortner in particular need to play better. Etienne had 12 carries for 40 yards in week two. That was much different than his week one game. But even his touchdown run in week one against the Colts to kind of put that thing on ice, he was stacked up on the interior and then was patiently waiting, kind of sliced off tackle there to score. So I think the Jags would like to run the ball more. There's been some questions about Peterson and Taylor perhaps not doing that as much in the week two game against the Chiefs, particularly when they got down to the one late in the game there. Trevor Lawrence on what looked like a zone read pulled it and tried to get in, but got stacked up for a loss there. So I think the fans would like to see them run it a little more, as much as we're in this pass happy era of the NFL with all the targets that the Jaguars do have. And they were able to do that in week one because they were in front, at least at the end of that ball game. So I think they're going to want to attack that Texans run defense after seeing what the Colts were able to do to them a week ago. Etienne's the guy to do it. He's very explosive, and they have Tank Bigsby, this rookie running back, that's a more physical runner. He's going to put his shoulders down. Not to say that Etienne's not, but I think those are the types of carries that they want to have on Bigsby to keep Etienne fresh. So I think you'll see a healthy dose of Etienne with Bigsby mixed in.
How do you see this one going? Do you feel like it's going to be a close one, a typical stuck in the mud Jags Texans, or you feel like this could be a real chance at a blowout?
I think there's a chance for a blowout there, and I'm not just saying that because I cover the Jaguars. I want to be unbiased, so I want to stress that with you guys. And part of the reason I say that is because Peterson said in his press conference today that it's enough talking about being early in the season and having any more excuses for the offense. He wants to be focused on the now. And I think we're going to see Lawrence have a bounce back performance. Some of these receivers like Zay Jones, I think if he's on the field, he's kind of dealing with a knee injury, should have a bounce back performance. He had a great touchdown catch in week 1. And I think ETN and that offensive line have been hearing about it a bunch. They're going to be fired up to show that, hey, we can get it done. We are supposed to be the team that's favored to win the AFC South division, and we need to step up. So I see this as a Jaguars win as long as they're focused and don't overlook Houston before going across the pond. They need to realize that there is some talent, and you guys know this well, young talent on this Houston roster. But I think the Jaguars, if they're focused, can win this by a couple touchdowns.
Remind us about your podcast and how to connect with you on social media. So in case any maybe Texans fans want to reach out to you and ask a question about the Jags or something.
For sure. Thanks, man. Appreciate you doing that. So the Bleav in Jaguars show we do at least twice a week with my colleague Clay Harbor there, former NFL tight end. He played for the Jaguars, was with the Eagles when Doug Peterson was the head coach there. So he knows the league from a very unique perspective. You can catch it on all of your major podcast platforms. And then also, if you want to get at me on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it these days, it's at JDunk12. We'll be happy to talk ball anytime, day or night with you guys. So I really appreciate you having me on and breaking down the matchup this week.
Hey, you were fantastic, Justin. Thank you, man.
Thanks so much for doing
guys.
this. Great stuff from Justin, Sean. And before we keep rolling, talking a little bit more Texans, just a reminder to check out yesterday's 10th anniversary show. Yes, this is our first show in the 11th year of Houston Sports Talk. My old co-host, Stephen Kerr and RG Seal, helped me look at our favorite memories and moments and go behind the scenes. I recommend watching this one on YouTube. If you're an audio listener, trust me on that one. There's a little Easter egg for you, a little nugget. But Sean, what's your feeling about Tunsil, Pitre, and Jimmie Ward this week? Are we going to see any of those three guys play?
I think it's very much in flux at this point. It was good news that Laremy Tunsil was back on the practice field today, along with Jimmie Ward. Jalen Pitre, however, was not. He was a DNP today. A surprise one today, which I didn't notice when I was out there because didn't know I was supposed to be looking for him, was no Denzel Perryman. He didn't practice today. Tavierre Thomas, the obvious one too, with the broken hand. But for Tunsil, D'Amico did clarify today that it is a knee, not knees, that is plaguing Tunsil to this point. And he basically just said, like, we'll see how he progresses this week. And that's it. He was a limited participant in practice today, as was Jimmie Ward. I saw Jimmie. He was moving around pretty well. Laremy was on a sled for a little bit of the time that I was able to view him during the media portion. So I think it's in flux. Jimmie, if you put a gun to my head and said one of these guys is going to play, who's it going to be? I'd say it should be Jimmie Ward. He got hurt against the Saints. He's had a lot of time, 3-4 weeks to kind of heal up with that hip. And it's just time. The secondary needs him in the worst way right now. And look, not to say that the offensive line doesn't need Laremy Tunsil, because my God, they do. They need any healthy body, any really good healthy body they could get. But it's only Wednesday. Ask me again on Friday or Saturday, man, what I think about Tunsil. And, unfortunately, we'll know by then with the final injury report.
D'Amico said soon was the quote that I heard on Jalen Pitre. I don't know what soon means.
I didn't interpret that as meaning this week anytime. I could be totally wrong. Nobody really knows how long it takes a bruised lung. I mean, that's not like a contusion or a soft tissue thing that somebody's dealing with, or a broken hand or bone of any sort. It's a bruised lung. The guy was coughing up blood. And at the end of the day, you got to feel right internally. You got to make sure you can have your wind. You got to make sure you got your energy. And look, him not being there on the practice field, I mean, that's the first strike, right? It's Wednesday. If he's not out there tomorrow, that's strike 2. And if he's not out there Friday, there's strike 3. You know your answer at that point in time. But DeMeco did say, dude's been active in terms of being there for team meetings, even though he's not dressed on game day this past week and not at practice today. He's out there, is what I took from it. Now, he's probably getting some kind of treatment when the media portion was out there. We didn't see him, but maybe he comes out later, for the latter half. The point is, DeMeco is extremely appreciative of the energy and the fact just the guy is making a point to be wherever the team is. And he's still being that leader, that vocal guy that this team needs right now.
I want to get to the Astros in a couple of minutes, but a couple of questions for you, Shaun. Number one, does it mean anything to you that CJ Stroud is 4th in total passing yards right now?
Yeah, it does, of course. Not because there was any doubt that he wasn't going to be an accurate guy. I mean, just watching him through training camp and workouts during the preseason, I could have told you that. So that was never really a concern. But it's more impressive because of the receivers and the way that Bobby Slowick and Ben McDaniel, their passing game coordinator, have found to get Nico Collins the ball, include Tank Dell immediately week 2 into an offense in which he was literally an afterthought. They can say that he was a part of the game plan or not. When you're targeted 4 times and you have that sort of athletic ability, you can't tell me he was a part of the game plan. But the quick nature in which they were able to kind of right that wrong, and there's still a few more that they need to correct. But it speaks more to just what receivers are actually on this team and how maybe we slided them a little bit. Nico Collins has clearly taken that next step. He's shown that he's not just a boundary receiver. He can gain separation. He can get through contact. Robert Woods, same thing. They use him and Nico very similarly in terms of finding him up the middle of the field. The separation that Woods has been able to get 2 years removed from ACL. I think it speaks more to those guys and the pass game plan from Bobby Slowick, which I think you need to give him a little bit of credit to this point. He still has a lot more work to do and a lot more to show offensively in terms of that creativity and personnel usage. But I think it all starts to look a little bit better, too, when you have, your projected 2.0 starting offensive line out there.
Yeah, I guess what I meant was, does it mean anything to you? Is there's probably people out there that are saying, hey, CJ Stroud's numbers are inflated because he's playing in a lot of trash time, that he's going against prevent defenses.
Yeah, well, I mean, go back and watch the game against the Colts. Maybe late, on that last drive, they were in prevent, but hell, they were still bringing the pass rush in the third quarter, late third quarter, early fourth quarter. They were still bringing it. So, I mean, don't talk to me about garbage time. Garbage time in terms of look at the scoreboard, but garbage times in terms of what the defense is actually showing you. I don't want to hear that. And hell, he was carving the Colts up, with the short pass game, the crosser, the 28-yard seam route run by Nico Collins. It was on the second drive of the game. So I think the most important thing, the most encouraging thing, the thing that you have to be excited about your quarterback for is, he's putting up the stats and he's got better numbers than the other 2 rookie quarterbacks that are playing right now. And he's making something out of nothing wide receivers on this team. Maybe Nico Collins is the one guy. Maybe Robert Woods is the other guy that you didn't really expect that much from. But hell, he's, at least for one game, he's showing you everything that you thought Tank Dell could be. Now you just get Tank into a little bit of space and let him create some yak on his own. Then we're talking about something.
You talk about Nico and Robert Woods again and again. And just to remind people, Nico is number 5 in receiving yards. Robert Woods is number 20 in the NFL, 2 top 20 guys. And even if people don't believe Stroud's numbers represent him because it is in catch-up ball and it is in junk time, 2 Texans receivers in the top 20 is legit, considering we expected CJ would be dumping passes to running backs and tight ends as a rookie with a banged up offensive line, but he's not.
Yeah, and maybe that was just short-sighted of us, and looking at the name and not really thinking in more of a football sense. I mean, I kind of, corrected that mindset for me personally after week one, where it was pretty evident that this was going to be a bad situation for the first 4 weeks with the offensive line in the shape that it's in. You're going to have to keep those tight ends on the damn field, not as pass catchers. I mean, you can find little creative ways, and in times of desperation, catch up ball, garbage time, whatever you want to call it. CJ found Dalton Schultz a few times. Okay. But you're keeping those tight ends to chip, to block, to do whatever you can to give CJ a tick more time to look downfield. I don't think he threw any passes 20 plus yards down the field this last week. And he's right there amongst the bottom feeders in terms of quarterbacks that have taken deep shots. Well, there's a reason for that. It's not because they don't have the dudes to do it with. It's because you don't have the dang time.
Right.
And look, there's numbers out there. I think I saw a stat, courtesy of Next Gen Stats, a couple of days ago that actually says, Bijani, well, you're an idiot. CJ Stroud has actually had some of the most time to throw in terms of a quarterback. Well, those numbers to me, I don't know the criteria of them, but I think you could probably excuse some of that away just given the fact that it's taken on average. Okay. So when you have an average of like 2 seconds to throw the stinking ball, and it's not because you want to throw it in 2 seconds, it's just you got to get the dang ball out versus having the ball and then having to move around and elude pass rush in the pocket, outside of the pocket, all those things. Maybe it takes all that into account, but just trust your eyes. You know what you're seeing. You know he didn't have a whole lot of time to throw the ball. Just that's where I think you got to give credit to Bobby Slowick and Ben McDaniel and CJ Stroud himself, these receivers, all of the above, for being able to adapt, understand the situation at hand, and trust that quick pass game. It worked really beautifully against the Colts when it needed to, and certainly you'd like to have seen him do that on the first series and have a much better start. But I'll say this. Robert Woods brought up a really good point, and I wanted to get to Justin on this, but I figured we could talk about it anyway amongst us. Robert Woods said something a couple days ago that was really interesting to me, in that, hey, the Jags are going to look and see exactly how we're getting the football. CJ's getting rid of the football very quickly. Our quick pass game is there. If they bring an extra, DB into the box, a walk down safety, take away the middle of the field, take away some of those slants that they're able to hit Tank on or Robert on, what are the Texans going to do then? What does that open up? Well, theoretically, it could open up the run game for the Texans. And it's just that pass run balance that Bobby Slowick has got to have an immediate pulse on to try and exploit that, and maybe taking calculated deep shots down the field.
Maybe he needs to think about it in terms of using the pass to set up the run instead of vice versa, which is not
Sure.
working at all.
Well, and I'm glad I mentioned that too, because that's something that I really kind of find fascinating, and I'd really like to talk to more people about it. And it's been a common thread of questions asked this week by the media to D'Amico Ryans, today to CJ Stroud. He was asked specifically that, his thoughts on using the pass to open up the run. And he'd said something that would make sense more if the Texans did it more. Sure, if you're having success throwing the football, then the defense has to respect it. But you also can't be obvious in the run as well. If you can show the propensity and make good on it on first and second downs in passing situations, rather than the obvious of third and longs, then sure, you can run the ball. But how are you getting to the pass? Are we going to see more play action, more bootleg from the Texans this week to maybe set that up? Because maybe that's something Bobby's willing to explore. That, look, I know people crushed me after week one. Dameon Pierce didn't have but 11 carries. And then week two, we were getting our throats stomped and people were crushing me for sticking to the run too late. How can he find that balance? I think that's one way. Can you find creative ways, timely ways to run bootleg, to run more play action, and at least just make those linebackers just wait a tick longer, and have that doubt in their mind? Because to me, that's part of the reason why we haven't seen Dameon Pierce really be Dameon Pierce. And how patient he's been as a runner. I'd like to see him change gears a little bit too and just get back to that one cut and go guy, lower that shoulder, because if the Texans are as confident in Devin Singletary as they said they are, then hell, you've got him for a reason. And it's time for him to step up and have some productive carries as well, if that's the case.
No, thanks. Not impressed with Devin Singletary at this point.
He ain't Rex Burkhead, so, pick one. It's time to play Russian roulette between those two guys.
He hasn't looked much better than Rex Burkhead so far.
Fair, he's like 10 years younger, so I'll take that.
Well, 10 years younger, but same talent. So I don't know if that helps you at all. I want to ask you, was Slowick asked at all about the pace? And what I'm talking about is, they made this big emphasis on the pace. You're down 3 scores and you have a 7.5 minute drive. I mean, that's not pace. You got to move faster than that when you're down 3 scores. It seemed like the pace was, spoken about by D'Amico, like, oh, it's way better, but I didn't see it much.
Well,
as far as,
I
don't know.
In terms of pace, I don't know that D'Amico actually used that word. It was what he was talking about after week 1 in Baltimore was the pre-snap operation, getting in and out of the huddle, getting to the line, getting the play calls in time, which they did a much better job of against the Colts. They did a really good job of that. Now, in terms of actually running a hurry up offense and seeing some type of urgency from them late in the game in the second half period. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't there, but by the way, to answer your initial question, no, Bobby Slowick was not asked about that because we're not going to get a chance to talk to him until tomorrow afternoon. Thursday afternoon is when they make the coordinators.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
But I will ask him if somebody else does not. But the only possible excuse that I could create and maybe imagine Bobby thinking in the second half against the Colts is, and mind you, case in point, the Texans at one point in time held the ball for 13 minutes out of a possible 19 game minutes, I believe, in the second half. It was something thereabouts.
I know what you're going to say. You're going to say they the offense for the Colts was on the field so much the first few minutes of the third quarter that you want to give your defense a chance to rest. You don't want to have a quick 3 and out and all that.
Yeah.
But I just hate that. It's one of the things I hate about NFL coaches. I hate that mentality. The mentality should be, this drive, we're going to figure it out. And we're still trying to win this darn game. We're not trying to make it close. We're not trying to cover. We're not trying to look good for the fans and for the national people that, hey, we kept this game close. We're trying to win the darn game.
Yeah. And look, I think to make your point even further, and I know you hate that philosophy and, gun to my head, I guess I'd have to agree too. Maybe I don't need a gun to my head, but, go back and look at that game. The Texans were in a situation where I think they ended up going for the field goal. I think that was the initial 46-yard attempt, which was blocked or just horribly missed by Kaimi. And they got bailed out because either or, it wasn't a good field goal. So they took a 5-yard penalty. It becomes a 51-yard attempt. They kicked the field goal there. No, I'm sorry. It wasn't even that. It was the touchdown drive before that. They had the opportunity to make the decision. Do we go for 2 here or do we wait? Well, would you rather know early that what you have to do is here's the case, let's lay it out? Or would you rather just, you know what, we're going to chip away, just get points. And if we have to get 2 at the end to tie this thing, we'll make that decision and determination then. It's kind of that calculated decision. Do you want to know now or do you want to know later? And I think the Texans, by slowing things down, and I'm not going to say they slowed it down, rather they just didn't deviate from their normal operating procedure, right? They were just trying to get to that point after looking so horrible and discombobulated on the road, albeit in Baltimore. But I think that was kind of part of the decision. And I'm just grasping at straws here, but I think it's really the only logical explanation to not see that urgency from the offense. But here's another idea. Who was the first guy to call out the offense, to call out the pre-snap operation, to call out the fact that, we need to get plays in. Well, D'Amico ain't calling plays into CJ Stroud. D'Amico is not having anything to do with the offense, but he called Bobby Slowick out, not directly. He called CJ Stroud out, not directly, but the entire offense after week 1 and said, hey, it needs to be better. And you know what? Against the Colts, it was better. And maybe D'Amico in closed doors, and I'm sure he's addressed this, maybe he did indirectly as well already when he's talking about energy, enthusiasm, no urgency. Well, if I would apply at least one of those things to anything not named his defense, which needs all of that and then some, it's the offense. Show a little bit more urgency when the game is still gettable, and you have time to do it and you feel this good about your quarterback. Let's see the urgency then.
Shaun, who's your favorite Astros pitcher right now? Is it Hunter Oberholzer, Christian Lucas Harrell, or Jose Urquidy Paulino? It's bad, man. It's bad. It's a dumpster fire.
Don't ask me these types of questions. Astro fan recency bias is a thing. There ain't nobody who I like right now. I guess gun to my head, I'd have to say Brian Abreu. I mean, that dude's on one hell of a tear. I think 22, 23 consecutive outings without giving up a run. So
Hector Neris. I love him.
I get down with some Hector Neris, whatever you want to call him. I think those are the only 2 cats in the bullpen with an ERA sub-3, and it's in the low 2s. So, yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, get out on your Ryan Presley stock, and it might be time to sell. I'm worried about Presley, man. It's been it just the whole year, Shaun. It just feels like Ryan Presley he can't get a simple 1-2-3 inning. It's like it's always a painful, even if he gets the save.
Yeah.
I feel like I've got to go get my roll-on deodorant and reapply it.
Yeah, he's got to work. That's the thing. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like six blown saves in the grand scheme of things. If he had 6 blown saves last year, you're not batting an eye. Like, unless it's like a bunch towards the latter part of the season and you're looking at this guy to be the dude to close games out in the postseason for you. But it's kind of the case now, though, too. If you think about it, he's blown 3 saves in his last 12 opportunities. And that's a concern. You want to be playing your best ball. You talk about it more so with hitters than anything else. You want to be swinging the bat, seeing the ball the best, ahead of the postseason. Well, same thing with Presley. You want to be throwing your best going into the playoffs. Right now, that's even in doubt. Big win on Wednesday during the day. That means they're guaranteed to not relinquish first place. So you can hang your hat on that one for one day's time. But they just got to start getting more of the expected contributions out of their dudes on a consistent basis. And that just hasn't been the case. Ryan Presley, it takes a lot of work for this guy to get the job done. You're right. I mean, even against some of the weaker opponents, he's not going out there and spinning, a 15-pitch inning and, fireworks and it's time to go home, fellas.
It's not like his stuff doesn't look still electric. I don't get it. I watch him.
Pointed out. Did you see this the other night? After his most recent blown save a couple of days ago, somebody pointed out that he's tipping his pitches. So did you see this at all?
I think I did hear that. Yeah.
Okay. But did you see it? And do you know why?
No, I did not.
So some dude, on Twitter found this video and hit one of my former colleagues up about it. And I saw it on his tweet. And so I went and I did my own digging. Damn it, it's hard to find like Brian Presley highlights that show everything. I had to go back on my DVR and freaking look at whole games. And I did find it. So I noticed, and it's with this guy originally. I wish I could remember his name on Twitter. At least I could credit him. But he noticed Presley tapping with his left foot. So he would tap. Now, he always taps. Like the tap is a thing. But he'll usually tap like once if it's off speed. But it's like a repetitive tap if it's a fastball. And that's legit. I went and I looked at a number of those. And it is for real. That's what he was doing. So pay attention to that the next time he takes the mound and see if that's something that's corrected.
Yeah, somebody said that people were sitting on his slider, which looks like an electric. I'm like, how do you sit on his slider? Even if you're sitting on it, it seems like it would be really hard. I look at it and I go, you could tell me that was coming all day. And even if I was like a legitimately great Major League Baseball hitter, it just seems like it would be really hard to hit.
Well, and look, there are other little things that kind of go into that. It sounds preposterous, right? Because yeah, we watch these games all the time. His slider looks like it stays in the zone, for 55 feet and then just it's out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Especially to a a left-handed hitter. That thing is freaking sick. And hell, a right-handed hitter, that's hard to see that vantage point just at breaking, in the way that it does so late. But you got to think about this too. Okay, so you can tip. Okay, so guys can sit on a particular pitch when they know that they're tipping. It's coming, but damn, he can throw it for a strike, and it sure does look good to hit. What about the sequencing? What about guys taking a brief little glance at where the catcher's set up? Because that can tell you a lot as well on, what? This guy in this situation, he likes to show in the zone, but 85% of the time it lands as a ball. And you go up there with that knowledge, at least in the back of your head. You're not married to it or by any stretch, but you go up there with that knowledge in the back of your head, and it makes it just that much easier to, yes, in fact, sit on those filthy sliders that Ryan Presley has the propensity to throw, which you saw. Like, he went viral here regionally a couple of weeks ago with the fastest spin rate of a slider, I think, or at least top 3, top 5, whatever it was, of a slider in Major League Baseball since they started charting this crap. And it was sick. That thing stayed in the zone. It looked like all the way till it sniffed home plate and just darted on the back ankle of a left-handed hitter. It was filthy.
Man, I don't know if it ticks you off, but I just get so tired of these managers that just get so caught up in the lefty righty thing. It doesn't even matter what the stats are. And the thing that just drove me nuts. And, we talk about Dusty and his lineups and all of the, kind of crap with that. And I get it. This year isn't about the lineups. It's about the starting pitching. I know good and well. And, the lineups, though, it might matter if it's if it's one game that decides,
it matters more when the pitching stinks, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, and when it's September and you're still, tied with everybody towards the end of the season, yeah, it's going to matter that one bad lineup that cost you one game. But I just got to talk about, so, in this game on Wednesday afternoon, when you and I are talking, the one that you and I just saw, he starts Martin Maldonado, which of course drives everybody nuts, but at least Christian Javier Yainer Diaz was in the lineup. At least Yainer Diaz was in the lineup. So it goes to the end of the game and Martin Maldonado comes up. So he goes, okay, I'm going to pinch hit for Martin Maldonado, which of course with Yainer Diaz in the game, that means that's the pitching spot if it goes to extra innings. And I know if the Astros go to extra innings, they're going to lose anyway. But I'm like, okay, I guess it's now the pitcher's spot. So now you're going to have to bring in your back end of the bench guys towards the end of the extra innings. But it wasn't even that drove me nuts. It's the fact that he pinch hit for John Singleton, who's been terrible, instead of Mauricio Dubon, because there was a right-hander on the hill. And here's the other thing that drove me crazy is the reason why Dubon wasn't available right there, and I don't know if he would have gone to him, was because he was pinch running Yordan Alvarez, who's a really great base runner. And, I get it. It was supposed to be his day off, but guess what? We needed you for one inning. And you could run the bases just fine. And I know Mauricio Dubon would be better, but I would much rather have Mauricio Dubon at the plate when you're down to your final outs than John Singleton. And I just hate the lefty righty. It just drives me. Look at the baseball card, Dusty. Sometimes you do have to look at the baseball card. And the baseball card says Mauricio Dubon this year is a better hitter against everybody than John Singleton.
Well, you're bringing Singleton up at that point to put good wood on the ball, right? I don't know what his numbers say in terms of batting average on balls in play, hard hit percentage, into outs, whatever. Hindsight, I don't know what the exit velocity was. I actually wasn't watching at the time. I was listening. Apparently he peed on one and it found somebody's glove on a diving attempt, right? He hit the ball hard. My thought process, I wanted to drive off the road when I heard Robert Ford on the radio broadcast say that Singleton was pinch hitting for Maldonado in that instance, because I was like, hold on, you're taking a 169 hitter and he's going to hit for at least a 191 hitter. But I'm like, I'll die on this hill. Martin Maldonado has much more of an opportunity to hit one out of the freaking ballpark than John Singleton does. He's got 2 freaking home runs, and he hit those 2 home runs in the same game, like the first 3 days he was in town with his ball club. Like, he hadn't done squat since. I was more mad about the fact that they just decided to hit crap for crap. And I get it. He hit the ball hard anyway, but that is the one instance where I was like, you know what? Here's one opportunity I'm giving Maldi, because I trust, like, versus the alternative, you have him and Kessinger, in there, and Brantley, who's clearly unavailable, not once, but for a fact, like, guaranteed passed over 2 times today. That means he was not available to swing a baseball bat or to do anything today outside of look pretty wearing the uniform. I'm trusting Maldonado more than I am John Singleton to go hit the ball hard and give me a chance at winning a football game. Give me a chance at winning the baseball game.
How about Greg Kessinger? I mean,
how about him? He was going to have to hit when the pitcher spot came up, later.
Well,
that's scary enough. He hadn't done squat either.
Yeah, I'd probably take him though over John Singleton and Martin Maldonado.
I'd take him over Singleton, I think, just because he's young and you never know. I mean, the kid could get going, but I mean, hell, you need 10 more years to figure out if John Singleton can hit a baseball at the major league level. Come on, this guy will not be here next year. And the fact that he's going to be a part in some way, shape, form, or fashion of hopefully a postseason run for the Astros is pretty damn unthinkable. Like, they've got some dudes on this team. Like, you're talking about a team that is trying to win back-to-back World Series. Hell, it's just trying to get into the damn playoffs now. But you got dudes like John Singleton and freaking Parker Mashinsky and Gage and all these dudes on the mound that they don't look like a team that they're sending dudes out there. They don't look like dudes that are trying to be defending World Series champions. I'm just saying that. I ain't got a good vibe. I ain't got a good feeling right now, even after the win today.
Well, I mean, those guys are back. I mean, hell, the lineup is it's loaded with MVPs. I mean, or top 3 MVP guys. I mean,
I know.
It's still loaded, and your pitching staff, it's how can you get mad at the Astros when everybody is just played to like the worst that they possibly. I mean, literally Christian Javier, rest in peace. I mean, I don't know what happened to him, but it seems like his career might be over with his fat. If he's not hurt, like, what else could it be?
Hey,
I mean, I don't know.
Go back and look today, Wednesday, 5 innings, really good baseball, right? I feel like, let's see, it's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of his last 9 outings. You can't count him as quality starts because the sucker can't get out of the 5th inning. Can't get into the 6th, rather. He get it out of the 5th, but he can't get into the 6th.
One reason, because that fastball, he just can't get the 3rd strike because that fastball is not the same.
Understood. But here's where we're at, Robert. You got to roll with, who's going to give you the best chance to win on a consistent basis. Christian Javier is slowly becoming that guy, I think ahead of Hunter Brown at this point. In terms of guys you feel most comfortable with, not named Justin Verlander and Framber Valdez, and you feel comfortable with those guys because, well, that's their names. And, they've got a track record that extends beyond this season and, last season, rather. I'm not saying you should feel great about it, but if you feel as good as you say you do, and I'm speaking in generalities to all the fans out there, but about this bullpen, then hell, give me the guy that's going to battle through 5 innings and keep it close versus a guy who, can show you that he can get into the 7th inning on a pretty regular basis, but at what cost? Because he could implode at any point in time and, put up a 5 or 4 spot in the inning and completely get you out of a ball game. So I don't know. It's nut cutting time. You got maybe 1-2 starts left to Christian Javier before the regular season's over. If he continues to do this, you have to take it.
Did I miss something? Is there something wrong with Spencer Arrighetti? Because he's your best pitcher at the AAA level. And I just thought he would at least have gotten a shot in September with a pitching staff that's in shambles right now. I don't get that.
I mean, you're as lost on it as I am. I don't know. That's a hell of a question for Dana Brown, to be honest with you. I don't know if anybody's asked him about Spencer Arrighetti or if everybody's been so caught up in, what we're seeing every day on the mound. But
I mean, maybe it's an innings thing, but I mean, even a Spencer Arrighetti that could give you 2 innings to piggyback off of these crap starters, so your bullpen doesn't have to maybe do as much work, at the end of the season, and you're not having to rely on, whoever in the middle innings, which, these days it's Phil Maton, which is, he doesn't quite look the same as he did early in the year. So I don't know, but I just, that one kind of stumps me. And, people might, I don't know if he's on the 40 man or not. If he's not on the 40 man, I'm sure there are, I'm sure there are guys that you can kick off the 40 man and they're not worried about losing, or whatever, because Spencer Arrighetti's, now on the 40.
This is his 4th year in professional baseball. He threw 24 innings in 20, 13 2/3 in 21, 106 in 2022, and he's thrown 124 2/3 this season in 2 different leagues. So that's Texas League and then Pacific Coast League, right? So he's kind of on that same trajectory, right, that Hunter Brown and JP France had been coming into this season, where he'd seen a pretty steady increase in years. And so that's a great question for Dana Brown. But if I was down there every day, I definitely would have been asking that.
Yeah, just something I thought about. Well, we will be back for the Texans and the Jags live post-game show, so stay tuned for that. Thanks a lot, Shaun.
Thanks, man. Had fun.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.